Welcome to this overview of the MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowships Call, which is brought to you by the Irish Marie Sklodowska-Curie Office, or IMSCO for short. The IMSCO is supported by Research Ireland and jointly operated with the Irish Universities Association. Our mission is to support the research community in Ireland across all sectors and disciplines in applying to the MSCA calls and implementing MSCA projects. Before proceeding, please note that the information presented in this overview does not supersede the content of the MSCA work programme or supporting proposal templates and guides for applicants. Interested applicants are advised to read the work programme and associated documents before starting their application. The MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowship Scheme funds individual training fellowships to support excellent postdoctoral researchers across all disciplines. The main objectives are to foster excellence through implementation of research projects, to enhance the creative and innovative potential of researchers holding a PhD, to stimulate international, intersectoral, and interdisciplinary mobility of researchers, and to expose researchers to the non-academic sector. In terms of the key features of the call, the postdoctoral fellowships applications are monobeneficiary, where the application is jointly prepared by a pre-identified researcher and the host organisation in a European member state or associated country. The call is open to all types of organisations across all sectors. It is a bottom-up call, meaning that the applicant chooses the topic of the research, and it is open to all disciplines. Proposals are submitted to one of 8 scientific panels, and you can find these in the work programme. Applicants can apply for one of 2 different types of fellowships. European fellowships are open to researchers of any nationality applying for funding to undergo a fellowship of between 1 to 2 years in a host organisation within a European member state or a country associated to Horizon Europe. The global fellowships are open to nationals or long-term residents of European member states or countries associated to Horizon Europe. The fellowship includes an outgoing phase of between 1 to 2 years in a third country, followed by 1-year return phase to a host organisation within a European member state or a country associated to Horizon Europe. Applicants have the option of including a non-academic placement in their proposal, which will allow for an additional funding for up to 6 months at the end of their fellowship. Within the postdoctoral fellowships, researchers can opt to undergo secondments or a placement to another organisation. Secondments are optional and can take place in any sector and in any country worldwide. But the cumulative duration of the secondments in a fellowship cannot exceed 1/3 of the fellowship duration. For a European fellowship, secondments can take place at any time during the project. However, for global fellowships, secondments can only take place during the outgoing phase. Researchers can choose to spend up to 3 months at the European host at the start of their fellowship, but this counts toward the maximum 1/3 secondment duration. Applicants can opt to include a non-academic placement, which takes place at the end of the fellowship, where they can spend up to 6 months extra in a non-academic organisation based in an EU member state or an associated country. Additional funding is provided for the placement. Planned secondments and placements should be included in the proposal, and their relevance and quality or added value will be assessed by the evaluators. proposals will not be penalized for not including a secondment or a placement period. Specific eligibility conditions apply for both the individual applicant and participating organizations. The beneficiary or European host organization applying must be a legal entity based within an EU member state or a country associated to Horizon Europe. The beneficiary signs the grant agreement with the Commission, employs the researcher, and hosts and supervises them at their premises during the fellowship. For global fellowships, a host organization in a third country is required to host the researcher for the outgoing phase. This must be a legal entity in a third country, and a letter of commitment from that organization must be submitted as part of the proposal. For researchers wanting to undergo a placement, this must be in a non-academic organization, which is different from the main European host, and it must be in an EU member state or associated country. For researchers, the eligibility criteria includes the following. European fellowships are open to researchers of any nationality, but global fellowships are only open to nationals or long-term residents of EU member states or associated countries. A mobility rule applies to the researcher. This means that the researcher must not have resided or carried out their main activity, so this means their work, their studies, etc., in the country of the beneficiary for European fellowships, or the country of the host organization for the outgoing phase in the case of global fellowships, for more than 12 months in the 36 months before the call deadline. Researchers must be in possession of a PhD by the call deadline. They do not necessarily need to have graduated, but they must have successfully defended their thesis, and it must be an unconditional pass with no further corrections or amendments required. Researchers should not have more than 8 years full-time equivalent research experience following their PhD. Please note that this is not calculated in calendar years, but rather the cumulative time spent conducting research since their PhD. Exceptions apply for career breaks, periods of long-term leave such as sick leave or maternity, paternity leave, time spent working in non-research roles, or research in third countries for those reintegrating to Europe. Applicants are advised to consult the Commission's assessment tool, included here, to determine if they meet this eligibility criteria. Finally, researchers who received a score of less than 70% in the previous call cannot resubmit the same proposal with the same host organization, and in the case of global fellowships, also the associated partner hosting the outgoing phase, to the following year's call. The proposed beneficiary must ensure compliance with the admissibility and eligibility criteria before submitting the proposal and must maintain all supporting documentation. We have included a couple of examples to explain this further. In this example, we have an Irish researcher who was awarded a PhD in Sweden in 2019 and still lives in Sweden. The researcher is applying for a European fellowship with a host institution in Ireland. Is the researcher eligible for a European fellowship? Researchers applying for European fellowships can be of any nationality. The researcher was awarded a PhD before the call deadline and is less than 8 years since the award of PhD, and the researcher has not resided in Ireland for more than 12 months in the previous 3 years. Therefore, this researcher is eligible. For the global fellowship example, we have an Indian researcher who was awarded a PhD in 2023 and has been living in Ireland since 2022, so a year previously. The researcher is applying for a global fellowship with a European host in France and an outgoing phase in Canada. Is the researcher eligible for a global fellowship? Let's see. The researcher was awarded a PhD before the call deadline and less than 8 years since the award of the PhD. They haven't lived in France for more than 12 months in the previous 3 years because they have lived in Ireland since 2022. But are they long-term residents in the EU or associated countries? In this case, we don't have sufficient information. If the researcher can prove long-term resident status in the EU or associated countries, they are eligible. Otherwise, they wouldn't be eligible. The MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowship calls follows a prescriptive budget model where the budget is based on unit costs. The budget table is included in the work programme with additional explanation of each category. In short, there are 2 categories. The first includes the contributions for the researchers, such as living and mobility allowance, and possibly a family allowance depending on your circumstances. The second category is the institutional unit contributions and includes research, training, and networking contributions, as well as management and indirect contributions. Note that the researcher allowance shown here are gross amounts and are subject to employer and employee statutory deductions. A country correction coefficient applies to the living allowance in order to ensure equal treatment and purchasing power parity for all researchers. For Ireland, this country correction coefficient is 136.4%. For the global fellowships, 2 different country correction coefficients apply, one for the European host and one for the third country hosting the outgoing phase. Proposals are evaluated through a single-stage application through the European Commission's Funding and Tender Opportunities portal. The application is composed of 2 parts. Part A contains all information related to the applicants. This is the researcher, the supervisor, the host organization, and also the secondment and placement hosts. You are required to answer the call's specific questions and complete any fields regarding eligibility requirements. Part B consists of 2 parts. The templates for these are available on the Funding and Tender Opportunities portal. Part B1 is the core of the proposal and includes the description of the action. There is a maximum of 10 pages allowed. Any additional pages will be disregarded by the experts. The questions are based around excellence, impact, and the implementation criteria. Part B contains the applicant researcher's CV, information on the host organization, ethical and security information, environmental considerations, and the letter of commitment if it is a global fellowship. Please refer to the templates on the 2025 MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowship Call page for more information. A postdoctoral fellowship proposal will be evaluated by experts on the basis of the award criteria, and this is excellence, impact, and implementation. Under excellence, reviewers evaluate the quality and pertinence of the research and innovation objectives, the methodology, including the gender and diversity dimension in the research, and open science practices, the quality of the supervision, training, and the transfer of knowledge, and the quality of the researcher's professional experience and skills. The proposal is reviewed for the potential impact on the researcher's career perspectives and employability, for the impact from the proposed dissemination, exploitation, and communication activities, and the project's potential to deliver scientific, economic, and societal impact. Finally, the quality and efficiency of the implementation is evaluated through the work plan, assessing the risks and effort assigned to work packages, and the quality and capacity of the host institutions, including hosting arrangements. Each criterion has a different weighting, with excellence accounting for 50% of the final score, impact 30%, and implementation 20%. As you can see, here are the opening and closing dates for the 2025 Postdoctoral Fellowships call. The call opens on the 8th of May and closes on the 10th of September. I would like to remind you that there are resources to help you prepare a proposal to the call. You will find these on our website at iua.ie/Marie Curie. Thank you for listening and best luck with your preparations.